The Legions of Athena. Chapter 8. Achilles had just entered his quarters after his training with Maximus. Max was really improving, he thought to himself, perhaps even a bit unnaturally fast. But he did not have time to worry about that just now. He still hadn't found time to speak with Daedalus about his kidnapping. He had headed to the war front the day after he reached Athens. He had no plans of joining the war full out, but it felt wrong to not help since he was here. It wasn't uncommon for him to be working with Athens. In the past 5 years since the war with Mars started, he had acted as a mercenary for Athena on multiple occasions. But this time he really was not needed. By the time he and Odysseus reached with the cavalry, the battle was mostly over, and there were just a few Martian soldiers left in the area. They had left back to Athens as quickly as they had went, leaving Daedalus's son, Icarus, in charge of the battlefront. The whole banquet for his return was an unnecessary event, but he knew why Athena did it. She still hoped that he would officially join her ranks in the Minervian army. She had asked him on multiple occasions, even offered him the post of a champion a long time ago. But he had declined all her offers. Even though Athens was the closest thing he had left to a home, he would not be part of the kingdom. His kingdom ended with the Greek Empire, an empire that won the Trojan War and perished along with it. A kingdom ruled by men, not gods, and he was not looking for a replacement for it. He left his room and went off to find Odysseus. His friend has been extremely busy with the upcoming festival, but he too was curious with what Daedalus had to say. Achilles hoped to find him now while he came for dinner, before he got called away for some other errands regarding the festival. He was hoping to find him in the commander's private dining hall somewhere, but before he reached far from his room, a familiar face caught up to him. It was Icarus, son of Daedalus, and the commander of the 8th Legion of Athena. Icarus was not a person you would easily mistake. His entire body was covered in a mechanical suit built by his father. Its most extraordinary features by far were its metal wings on its back. But the suit was not just for show. An ill-fought battle against the sun god Apollo had left Icarus's body with severe burns. That did not heal. The suit was the only thing preventing him from feeling excruciating pain. "I didn't realize that you had returned from the war front," Achilles said. Icarus's face too was covered by this suit, a plain mask made of bronze with nothing but 2 openings for the eyes. "I returned yesterday along with the champion. All the high ranks were ordered back for the festival, but I'm afraid we don't have time to catch up. I was coming to find you and give you this," Icarus said, handing over a bag to Achilles. He opened it to find an Athenian guard uniform inside. He looked at Icarus for an explanation. "Wear this and come to the throne room," Icarus said. "Make sure that you have the helmet on as well. We have a visitor, and goddess Athena would like it if you were there as well, just in case." Achilles didn't like the sound of that. Whoever the visitor was seemed to have Athena worried enough to want him at her side as well. "Who is it?" he asked. Icarus unfolded his wings to glide back to the throne room. Before he left, he said, "The ferryman." Achilles changed into the royal guard uniform and headed for the throne room. He knew why Athena wanted him there. In case there was any trouble, he would be a secret ace in the hole for her, since her guest wouldn't be expecting it. And he was a man who could create a lot of trouble, the ferryman. The ferryman was not a name you would hear if you lived a normal, honest life. But in the murky alleys and the shady pubs visited by scoundrels and mercenaries, you would hear that name in whispers. It was a moniker given to one of the most influential officers of the underworld, Charon, the consigliere to Don Hades. The consigliere, which roughly translated to counselor, was one of the highest positions in the underworld. It was a position held by an advisor or spokesperson to a mafia don, and this was the position held by Charon. Don Hades had not left his kingdom in many centuries, and rumor is that it is because he has been charged with the duty of eternally guarding the great prison of Tartarus, which held the Titans. In any case, this meant that he has to send someone else in his place to speak for him, and that person was Charon. Him acting as a link between Hades and the rest of the world is what earned him the name ferryman in the first place. As the saying goes, one must pass the darkest waters to reach Hades, and only the ferryman knows the way. So in short, when Athena deals with Charon, she will be dealing with Don Hades himself. When Achilles entered the throne room, it was already packed with quite a large number of people. All of Athena's royal council seemed to be there. In addition to them, there were around 20 royal guards as well. They all wore uniforms identical to the one Achilles wore. He walked up to Odysseus and pressed a button on the side of his helmet, which opened his visor to reveal it was him. "Ah, Achilles, you're here. Good," Odysseus said. "Did Icarus tell you about our guest?" Achilles nodded in response. It was easy to see Odysseus was worried. The grim expression never left his face. "Station yourself along with the other guards. There is probably no need to worry, but keep your eyes open, just in case," Odysseus cautioned. Achilles put his visor back on and headed to his position. Athena's throne room was large and circular in shape. It was situated on the topmost floor of the castle, with only the towers of the castle rising higher. There were pillars decorating the circumference of the metal walls, while large life-size marble statues stood between them. The roof, however, was a large glass dome, held by a metal frame shaped like a honeycomb. The glass roof revealed the night sky above them. It was pitch black with no moon or stars visible. At one end of the room was the entrance, with large reinforced metallic doors that opened automatically. On the opposite end of the doors, on a slightly raised platform, was an elegant silver throne. It was kind of plain as far as thrones go, with not a lot of decorations on it, except for the statue of an owl with its wings spread and an olive branch in its mouth, perched on top of it. On it sat the goddess herself wearing a flowing gold and white gown. 3 distinguished people stood on Queen Athena's left, one of whom was Daedalus. Apart from him stood Lady Pallas, a beautiful and accomplished elf woman who was a close friend and personal advisor to Athena, and Dalton, a portly man who acted as the court herald and the queen's personal helper. To the right of Athena's throne stood a man Achilles hadn't met before, but knew by reputation. He was well built and around 7 feet tall. His hair was black mixed with a lot of gray, and had a similar gritty beard. He was square-jawed, and his eyes looked angry. He wore iron boots and leather slacks along with a sleeveless bronze breastplate that showcased his large and muscular arms. Scars could be seen on his neck and hands, and it seemed there were more under his armor. Here his official title is the Champion of Athena, but he is better known around the world as Theseus, the Minotaur Slayer. A long blue carpet, which was luxuriously decorated with silver threads, was laid out from the entrance of the throne room to the podium on which Athena sat. The 8 commanding officers stood on either side of it. 4 commanders stood on each side of the carpet, according to the number of the legion they commanded. Odysseus, who held the title of general commander and leader of the first legion, stood closest to the goddess. Achilles only knew a few of the remaining commanders personally, like Icarus, but he knew that all of them were tested veterans on the battlefield. Even the leader of the 4th Legion, Commander Leos, who was still greatly injured, was present and had half his body covered in a cast. After everyone was in position, the goddess ordered one of her guards to fetch their guests. A few minutes passed and no one uttered a word. The tension within the room seemed to even make the air heavier. Finally, the doors opened again and 2 men stepped inside. In the front was a man Achilles had met before, a long time ago during the years of the Trojan War. He was thin and sickly looking with a body that seemed to be just bones covered in skin. His gray hair was neatly combed to a side. His bony face had dark circles that made him look as though he hadn't slept in years. His lips curled into a thin smile that was more eerie than inviting. He wore an expensive gray suit along with a dark blue tie with tiny anchors printed on them, as if to show that he truly enjoyed the name ferryman. Walking beside the ferryman, behind him was a man Achilles did not know. He wore regular jeans with a bright orange t-shirt with the picture of a cartoonish cyclops sleeping on a hammock. His hair was black and unruly like he had just gotten out of bed, and he had a bored expression on his face. He also had a bag of salted poppy seeds in his hand which he was snacking on. He looked like he was in his 20s, but Achilles knew better. He could sense that the man was much older and much more dangerous than any other person in the room. "Ah, my goddess Athena, you look as radiant as ever," Charon said with an unnerving smile. "Skip the pleasantries, Charon." Athena replied coldly, "I know the messenger of the underworld did not come all this way to pay me compliments." Charon did not seem insulted by this. He seemed very used to this reaction. "Straight to business then. Well, my goddess, I understand you must be busy with the upcoming festival, so I'll get right to the point," Charon continued. "We would like to, that is to say Pluto, the empire of Lord Hades, would like to form an alliance with you." This was a surprise to say the least. Everyone in the room seemed confused by these words, and Achilles knew why. Throughout the ages, the gods had formed alliances and treaties with each other for various purposes, usually for trade or for extending their military support during a war. All the gods did this. All the gods, except Don Hades, that is. It is said that in the millennia since the Titan War, after the dawn of the New Age, the lands of Hades has never allied itself with anyone. Even Athena was at a loss for words. I do not understand," she said, perplexed. "Allies, I'm sure you are familiar with the concept," replied Charon. "We become partners, if you will, in terms of commerce, trade, and of course war." The whole council exchanged incredulous looks, but no one spoke a word. They all waited for Athena to speak again. "I am honored by your offer, but I do not understand the need for it. Our finances are stable and our reserves are well stocked," Athena said. "And as for my army, it is already quite a formidable force, as you may have noticed," she said, referring to her council around her. All of a sudden, the man next to Charon started laughing. He seemed to have finally gained interest in the conversation, and he pocketed the bag of poppy seeds he was snacking on. "Are you talking about these jokers?" He dared, looking around the room. "Please." He raised his hand, and with just a snap of his fingers, almost everyone in the room fell to the ground. Achilles felt it too, a force that was making him rather drowsy. But he still managed to hold on to his consciousness. He looked around to find that, other than the 2 visitors and Athena, only Odysseus, Theseus, and Daedalus were still standing. All the guards and even the other 7 commanders were on the floor. The man looked around to admire his handiwork and said, "Allow me to introduce myself. I am Hypnos, god of sleep, and one of the 5 capo regimes of Hades." "How dare you?" Athena shouted, outraged. "Don't worry, they're not dead. After all, death is my brother's business. I merely put them for a nap," said Hypnos. "As is evident, you can see your forces aren't as formidable as you think. Though I must say I didn't expect you to be standing, old man, he said, looking at Daedalus. Oh, don't worry. I'm sure I would not pose a challenge to you, Hypnos. In my years as a scientist, I have realized that preparation is the key to survival. As part of such preparations, I have learned quite a few tricks to help me withstand such unexpected attacks. Daedalus replied with a smile. Hypnos seemed impressed by this. Good for you. It was quite surprising, but not nearly as surprising as that, Charon said, looking straight at Achilles. Achilles was standing at the rear of the room, out of the line of sight. He was considering pretending to be unconscious, but it was too late. Charon had just caught him. Hypnos stared at him and remarked, "If you're still standing after one of my sleep waves, you are grossly underpaid, my dear guard." "Oh, that's no ordinary guard, Hypnos," Charon declared. "It has been a long time, hasn't it, Achilles? Your metal leg is hard to hide." Achilles removed his helmet, walked up to Charon. "It's not been long enough, though," countered Achilles. Charon smirked at him. "Nice to see you haven't lost your arrogance. We creatures of the underworld are used to being unwelcome, but don't forget that the stench of the underworld is carried by you as well. The invincible armor you have is forged from it. That can never be hidden, even if you put it away in a crystal. I think it is best if you two catch up with each other some other time," said an annoyed voice. It was Theseus, and his glare conveyed that it was not a request. "My apologies, champion. Let us return to the business at hand," Charon said with a forced smile. "We will discuss nothing until you awaken my men," stated Athena. "I would prefer not to, my dear goddess," Charon said, sneering. "You see, the matters to be discussed are of a delicate sort." "I don't care," began Athena before Charon cut her off and said, "Tell me, goddess, I have heard that you have an amazing memory. If that is so, could you please read this letter and answer a question?" He took out a small piece of paper and handed it to Athena. She took it from him and began to read it. As she did, her eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at Charon, expecting an answer. "You recognize the handwriting?" he asked. "How did you?" "I thought she was dead," Athena whispered. "She's one of us now, a capo regime like me," Hypnos said. "Yes, it was actually her idea to extend an alliance. Said we could trust you," Charon added. "No, why would she join hands with the underworld?" Athena demanded. Charon thought for a while. "I suppose when you make very powerful enemies, you start looking for allies in dark places. A piece of advice you should follow if you wish to protect the old inventor here," he said, throwing a glance at Daedalus. Achilles wasn't surprised that Charon knew about Daedalus being abducted. The underworld had its own ways of gaining information from the shadows. But what worried him was the talk of a mighty enemy. It seemed Charon knew exactly who Ares was working for. Athena had a grim expression on her face. "My loyalty lies with the Olympian Council," declared Athena. But Charon began to laugh, a sickening cackle of amusement. Now, Athena, we both know that's not true. Not since that incident with Themis," he reminded with a smirk. "Soon you might find it hard to keep up the pretense as your kingdom burns to ashes." "You dare speak such blasphemy," Theseus interjected. "But my dear champion, who better to speak blasphemy than the demons of the underworld?" continued Charon. "How dare the likes of you even mention Themis?" Athena roared, her eyes filled with rage. My. "I seem to have touched a nerve," Charon remarked. "I did not mean to insult you, goddess, but merely spoke the truth. But it seems you need a bit of time to ponder over our offer. We shall be in the city for the festival. I do hope we can reach a favorable agreement before it ends." With those words, Charon started walking to the door, along with Hypnos, who had started munching on his poppy seeds again. As the doors shut behind them, everyone turned to Athena for an answer. Noticing that the others were slowly regaining consciousness, she cautioned, "Do not speak of this to anyone." She then strode out of the room, clutching the letter she had received, without waiting for her council to awaken. Achilles helped the others back to their feet. As per Athena's instructions, those who fell unconscious were only told that their guests were denied any discussion, since they had attacked the council and were made to leave immediately. While Odysseus spun a story to convince the others, Achilles was deep in thought. The conversation with the ferryman had just confirmed a suspicion he had, one he desperately wished was not true. Ares had quite a few inexcusable attributes to him, but being weak was not one of them. The war god was also not the type to take orders from someone whom he did not fear. Achilles had hoped that Ares was the biggest threat that they would have to deal with, but it was evident now that the situation was much worse. This has been a chapter from Book 2 of the new World Odyssey Series, The Legions of Athena. Links to the books in the bio. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. See you in the next chapter.